Hello, and welcome to today's forum. Today's forum is for the mayoral candidates for the City of Biddeford. This is done in conjunction with the Office of Citizenship and Civic Engagement at the University of New England and the Public Access TV. My name is Sam McReynolds. I'm a professor of sociology and the academic coordinator of the Office of Citizenship and Civic Engagement. Today's forum is for the purpose of giving the candidates an opportunity to express their ideas to the voters. It's an opportunity for the voters of Biddeford to hear what the candidates have to say. And I'm particularly proud and pleased to say that it's also an opportunity to engage UNE students in the process. In fact, the students today are the ones who have talked to the candidates, talked to key informants in the community, and have compiled all of the questions that will be asked in today's forum. And I am personally pleased and proud to be here as the host of today's event. And I would give a little quick background before we introduce people. Today we'll be asking a series of questions. Each question will be timed, roughly 3 minutes each, of our candidates. The candidates will then have a chance to respond to the other candidate's presentation. Then we'll move on to the next question. Each candidate will also have an opportunity to make an opening and closing statement, and we will then end our event. And we appreciate your tuning in and hope this is informative for you. Now, I'd like to turn to our candidates and ask them to introduce themselves.
When I was inaugurated 2 years ago, I pledged to try to change the atmosphere of the City Hall and also change the stereotype of Biddeford. One of the ways in which I did that immediately was to create something called Winterfest, where we could exchange cultural and just fun times within the city square by hauling in snow and creating a sledding park as well as other activities. My idea being that community begins with having bonds with individuals and just generally laughing and having a good time. I wanted to use my mayor's position as a bully pulpit to trigger business, and I work closely with the Heart of Biddeford to develop new businesses in the downtown. We created something that was called the Downtown Challenge, and that was very successful. 3 brand new businesses coming into Biddeford, and lately the City Council also approved the encore presentation of that event. But it goes beyond that. I think that if you look at my administration, some of the things that we've done have been noticeable. First, the elimination of main energy. That was something that no one expected, and it was something that we accomplished. The beginning of single-stream recycling. Again, that was something that was talked about for many, many years, but nobody could actually pull the trigger on it for various economic reasons. Our market basket, we nurtured that development for over a year before we got them here. And we've been working collaboratively with the mills, trying to stimulate business, because I think that it's really important that we look at Biddeford as the engine of York County. York County is the fastest growing county in the state of Maine. When I was a kid, Main Street was bustling, and I think we can do that again. I'm an optimist by nature. One of the things that I pushed for was the branding of the Biddeford Saco name, Biddeford Saco Biddeford, no matter how you say that, because again, I began to believe that as an economic unit, we're really one community. And the results have been rewarding. My office daily receives inquiries about setting up business in Biddeford. It's an exciting time to be mayor, and I think that in the next 2 years, we can continue moving in that same direction to stimulate business, to encourage development. And it's important to note that I received a little bit of advice when I first became mayor. And that was, if you're looking for investment, if you're looking for new business, you have to convey stability of government. You have to convey an interest in government. And I think we've done that. I think that just by looking at what's happened on Main Street and what's happening in industrial parks and what's happened on Route 111 demonstrates that Biddeford is a hotspot. In fact, I'm proud to say even Forbes magazine said the Portland-Biddeford corridor is one of the hottest spots in America. Not in New England, in America. So I think we're doing something right. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Toomey?
Yes. I want to say that I love Biddeford and I love the people of Biddeford. And I'm more concentrating on the people and not having gentrification happen in the city, which I think is happening. what we're doing for the people who worked in the mills, my grandparents who came from Canada and only could speak French and went to work in the mills, those people are now having a very hard time holding on to their homes. And I'm all for the mill development and the downtown, but we have to be realistic. And how do we get there? How do we help those people? The reason I'm running is because people are stopping me because they're saying, please run again. And you know, I didn't think I would, but I really believe that if you persevere and you believe in something, and I believe in the people, not the buildings, and I believe that we have lots of things that we can accomplish, but not the way we're going. I do believe that the mill rate has gone way up and people are hurting. The state is cutting back and we have to find ways to help the people. And I really, when I was elected, had a tragic situation where somebody who didn't deliver the oil for the people of Biddeford, and the people had paid for their oil. And so I got home, I saw the ad on TV, 1-800-CALL-JOE, and that's exactly what I did. I called 1-800-CALL-JOE, and the next morning they called me at 6 a.m. at home and told me they would donate $35,000 to the city of Biddeford for those people who had been ripped off. I was challenged by many, many things under my administration, and the Merck issue is not over just because Merck is gone. They have a fence around it. The testing that they did on the plant showed that we have dioxin and heavy metals, and I've always been concerned about the health of the community, not just the incinerator itself, but what it has done to us. Now we've got a fence around it. They never talked about what happened to those test results, and we're going to have a VRAP, which the environmental protection comes in. How they will sell that, I have no idea, except that they're going to advertise internationally. I do believe it's a stigma, and I do believe that just because we're single stream recycling, you're not looking at the big picture, that when they pick up our waste, that waste goes to Westbrook. There's Smiling Hill Farm across from it, and then they're trying to buy a landfill in northern Maine. I find that all of Maine is my home, and I'm very concerned in the processes that these people are into. So it doesn't stop at just taking it down. And the stack is still there. How much will that cost when we have to take that stack down? So there's been health issues that I have fought 30 years for. I collected samples that brought a $2 million fine against that industry. I'm very proud of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Aberley?
I've been a resident of this great city my whole life. As your youngest elected city councilor, I demonstrated honesty and integrity. 20 years later, I want to do the same as your next mayor. Today, we face less jobs and the highest tax increase in years. The mayor's promise 2 years ago was more jobs, economic development. I will show you today that my plan to lower taxes and increase jobs. I may not have all the answers, but I promise I will always put the best interest of you first. It's about time we stick together as one and move this great city forward. That is my promise to you. No special interest groups, just one city rising where the water falls. Thank you.
Thank you very much, candidates. Now let's turn to our questions. And Mike, you'll begin and ask Ms. Toomey the first question.
Ms. Toomey, the first question is based on taxation. State support for Maine's communities has gone down and the mill rate has increased as a result. What should Biddeford do to stabilize the tax rate? Should it cut services, expand the tax base, or both? What should the city cut and how can it expand the tax base?
I think the city needs to make better decisions. I totally am opposed to a $30 million parking garage. And I'm totally disgusted when the people go to vote for something and that money, there was a vote for that TIF to bring the sewage, not the treatment plant, but the sewer to Arundel, because we had some issues on toxicity, the way the chemicals were running. So we went to a vote for that, and then the DEP came in and said, well, there isn't an issue and we don't have to do it. But people voted for that money to go there. And I have a problem when people vote for something that the government decides they're going to use it for something else. And these TIFs are being used for everything. the school renovation that I championed. I was the mayor. We were about to lose accreditation, and I went to bat to renovate that school in the worst economic times. And I went door to door, and I asked people, please, education is number one. Give me this, and I promise I'll try to find something to offset this, because without education, you have nothing. And so now there was some money left over on the bond, and the people voted for that bond. I took that very seriously, okay? It's not to say that what the school department is doing isn't needed. They want an electric board outside to give messages or to educate the public on certain issues. The problem is you should go back to those very people who voted for that and ask them if they think that that's all right. I'm all about asking the people you serve, when you spend their money, do they think it's a good idea? This hasn't happened in this administration. When people vote for something, this administration has turned their backs on the people. When you do that, you're not a good public servant. I'm sorry. The Charter Commission met. We had a question, do you want the superintendent to live in the city? The people spoke. They said yes. Good, bad, or indifferent, that was a charter question. And then this administration turned around and brought it to Augusta to say, oh, well, the people don't know. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't understand. It made me livid, because as much as this superintendent is very good and he only lives in Saco, it makes sense for him not to have to move. It's the next superintendent and the one after that. What if we get someone from Texas or someone from, East Gish? We want them to live in the community that they serve. So that bill didn't pass. The governor vetoed it. And so now Mr. Ray has gotten a condominium. But that's not the point. The point is, when people speak as an official, you should respect that vote and not turn your back on it and do something else. And that makes me very upset.
Thank you. The next question, or excuse me, same question for Mr. Aberle. Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, thank you. I think, first of all, the city needs to stop holding on to valuable properties that are generating little or no income. For example, we have the ice arena. I think that, we've had inquiries recently to buy the ice arena, and that would generate $43,000 in taxes. I think it's time that we finally sell the airport. Another thing that generates no income. We've fought over for years whether or not we're going to develop the airport. It's located amongst housing. It's located near our schools. It's time to sell the airport. That would generate roughly about $150,000 worth of tax revenue. We, as a city, we own so much property that we're making little or no money on. And it's time that we start to look at what we own for property and start selling the property. I also reviewed the operational budget, the current operational budget, and I see approximately $500,000 worth of cuts that can be made. Not city services. There's a lot of gravy in that budget. 2 years ago, we spent approximately 20% less. Today, we're spending more, and we're throwing it out onto the taxpayers. Finally, I think when I start, if elected, when I do start with the budget process, the right from day one, we need to look at every line, and we need to make sure that we're proposing a budget that's feasible for the city, but also doesn't burden the taxpayers. One promise I will make is that we will send, if the council approves that, the budget, the city side of the budget, along with the school side of the budget, out to referendum so that the voters can decide whether or not taxes go up. I also think I'll leave that for another question. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Cassavant?
I moved into my home on Meeting House Road in 1983, and when I did that, I paid approximately $1,400 in taxes. Currently, I pay somewhere between $4,200 and $4,300. So I asked the finance director a number of weeks ago, if you factored out inflation, what does that mean? What it means is that my taxes essentially have gone up 1.1% every year over the last 30 years or so. Now, if you look at that as a small number, it's incremental, but if you stretch it out, obviously it's a lot of money. 2 years ago, actually, a little over a year ago actually, I vetoed the budget, and I used this analogy. Back during the Salem witch trials, there was something called pressing to death. And when someone was pressed to death, they put stones on an individual. And you can probably imagine that the first stone probably didn't really hurt that much. But as you increase the weight of the stones, eventually reach a point where even the smallest stone hurts. And I think for many people, especially those in fixed incomes, we're at that point, psychologically and economically, because they can't afford it. In other words, what I'm saying is the old system of doing government doesn't work very well anymore, because what used to happen was if you had inflationary costs, which is what's facing the city today, it was easy to pass on the cost of inflation to taxpayers because taxpayers were seeing raises in their salaries. Well, that's not happening. One of the things that I did in Augusta in the past month or so is introduce a couple of bills that hopefully will help to some degree to offset that. One is to look at casino revenues and allow individuals who are 70 or older and live in their homes for a particular amount of time to receive an offset on their property taxes, at least in terms of the school section. I also introduced a bill that raises the sales tax a half penny to do exactly the same thing. Now, one of the problems in Augusta is that in terms of taxation, sometimes the state, actually oftentimes the state is dysfunctional. They try to do things piecemeal and not in whole. In other words, what I'm saying is that the state of Maine determines tax policy, not the city of Biddeford. So property tax is a result of state law. The state's very reluctant to change the formula for a number of reasons. And what's happened is we have a state policy that is essentially a 20th century industrial model when today we have a service economy. So it's not working. I really believe that the way to get us out of this is through business investment. In other words, by redevelopment of the mills, redevelopment of the industrial parks, putting money into those areas are going to work. And that's exactly where my focus has been. I've allowed my staff, I've got a great staff, to use their expertise to generate income. Now, we're going to see that in the next year or two. We're going to see more and more jobs being created. But that's my job. That's my job to try to stimulate that by using my mayor's position as a bully pulpit. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you have any other extra responses to that, Ms. Toomey?
I would. You know, talk is rhetoric. You know, I can say that I'm going to bring all kinds of jobs. You know, I had a plan. And again, I'm going back to education. Without education, you have nothing. And I would not lose accreditation under my watch. And I'm still pushing for education. Without education, you have no economics. And you know, we've got a few problems at our school. When I was the mayor, they dummied down what you needed for credits to graduate. And I call it dummying down because I don't think that's the way to go. We should be asking more from our students. We should be pushing, make it harder for them to graduate, not decrease it. So I was the mayor that didn't agree with the superintendent of schools, didn't agree with my school board, didn't agree with you know, what was being presented. Okay, 30 seconds. I lost. So now that makes me lose my train of thought. But I believe that I tried to bring revenue into this city from a number one, and look, I'm not a gamer, I never voted for that in the legislature, but when you're wearing a hat and you've got infrastructure problems and roads that we can't even pave, and again, going back to education, they should have everything they want. I tried to bring in revenue. I tried to bring in a first-class Racino. I would never have signed on with Las Vegas, but these people They own the Samoset, they're amazing. I never got help from this administration in the legislature. I never saw the whites of their eyes in that room. We would not have any financial problems in this city. That thing would be built. Oxford sold their
Ms. Toomey,
Racino for $160 million. Sorry, I could go on and on.
First of all, I want to say that the mayor did veto the budget. It was $300,000 that he vetoed, I believe, which is a joke. That wasn't going to amount to any tax relief whatsoever with that high tax increase. I think it amounted to 7 cents. It was a way to say to the public, I'm vetoing this budget. I'm going to put my name and I'm not going to approve this. But lack of leadership was the reason that we were in a mess that first budget process that Mayor Kazvan was involved in. We didn't approve a school budget until late in September because the voters held the city side of the budget, the school side of the budget ransom because of the city side of the budget. We basically, and then he came out last minute and vetoed $300,000. We should have, if he was going to stand up to the raising of taxes, he should have vetoed $1 million. He should have vetoed $2 million. He should have vetoed the entire budget and started from scratch. Lack of leadership and direction during the budget process was why we were in the mess we were. And you can sit there and say that you're going to cut taxes in the next 2 years. You're going to have tax relief, and jobs are going to come down the road. But that was his promise in his first 2 years, and he didn't deliver his promises. Thank you.
A couple of things, because there's a couple of errors here. First of all, when you look at the tax increases, if you look at the school renovation, which was needed, I taught for 35 years, my room leaked. $216 of every $200,000 of valuation for the next 20 years or so go to that particular renovation. $216 for every $200,000, a significant amount. It definitely bumped up taxes. Secondly, it's really important that the city be aggressive in getting new revenue. The city's been negligent in terms of the airport revenue. The last administration had an opportunity to get additional police officers at 75% funding. It declined to do that. The Racino, obviously, it sounds good on paper, but I think we'll be talking about that more later. But in terms of transparency and in terms of delivery, there were some questions in the last 2 years regarding that. I vetoed the budget actually requesting even more money, but it's the council that ultimately decided exactly how much could be vetoed. And so obviously the mayor is not all-powerful. We do have some limitations. And lastly, the idea of sending a budget out to the voters is against the city charter. You cannot do that.
It's not against
and so
the city
again,
charter.
that's just speculative in being able to do that. So anyway,
Not against
my
the city
point is
charter.
that the whole idea of myself is that you got to provide leadership. You got to make some tough decisions that some people may not like, but you have to deal with the facts that you have on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa, our next question.
This next question is for Mr. Aberle. What are the major infrastructural problems in Biddeford, and what should the city do to correct the problems in the infrastructure?
I think that we certainly paving. Some of the roads need paving. That was, with this high tax increase in the past administration, the current mayor and council sent the paving projects out to referendum so that they didn't have to include it in the budget. So, that I believe that nothing was budgeted for paving. Because we did have the tax increase. We have the clock tower, the City Hall clock tower, which is going to cost $2 million approximately to renovate. That was a promise that the mayor made as well. I haven't seen anything done with the clock tower. It's ready to. It's going to fall off the City Hall. To correct some of the problems, we're going to have to, we need more tax revenue. We need We need to revitalize downtown Biddeford. We need an anchor for downtown Biddeford. We need to bring a company that's going to come in and draw businesses to our downtown. We need, there's a lot of problems with, that need to be addressed as far as infrastructure. And right now, the best thing I can say is that, more tax revenue, and certainly less frivolous spending that in the city budget. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Cassavant?
Thank you. To be quite honest, the situation with the city's infrastructure is a time bomb waiting to happen. Mr. Aberle indicated a number of the problems, and they're all real. Roads, well, I'm sure if you've driven on Mile Stretch Road, for example, especially on a bicycle, it's a challenge because you have to look for cracks, otherwise you'll be going head over tails onto the roadway. Sewers, we got a 200-year-old sewer underneath Main Street, made of brick. That collapses, major problem because we have no money in the budget to fix that. The roof of the community center needs work. We've got an airport that needs work. We got $40 million coming in sewer separation that has to be done by EPA and DEP agreements. None of this stuff is cheap. Now, the city council, in its wisdom, decided that in terms of roadways, the clock tower, and other things, to put it on a ballot to allow the people to decide, and they rejected it. And the reason why we did that, because any of those projects, any of them at all, if you put it inside the mill rate budget, it blows the budget out of the water. So little has been done over the last 10 years that we're facing a crisis. A number of councils have indicated that we've kicked the can down the road for many years, and to be perfectly honest, we're still doing the same thing. So what has to happen is that we have to have a community dialogue to talk about exactly how we're going to fund this, because it has to be done. Not only does it have to be done, the longer you wait, the more it costs. Prime example is roadways. It's much cheaper to resurface a road when it starts to crack than if you wait until the cracks split because water and ice get into it. Then you have foundational issues. So something that may cost, we'll say, $500,000 to fix, suddenly is $1.2 or $1.3 million to fix. That is where we're going. There's no easy way out. The only options, again, are raising taxes, looking for new revenues, looking for grants. The city is contemplating hiring a grant writer to do things. The federal government has millions and millions of dollars of all sorts of grants out there. The city goes after zero of them, essentially, because we don't have anybody on staff to do that. Police department does a little bit, but we need some greater expertise. So that's being deliberated to do that. So again, as I said at the very beginning, it's a time bomb. It's something that has to be done, has to be faced, but we have to have dialogue because the voices of the community have to be involved in discussing it, not just dismissing it, but discussing it and thinking about methods in which to deal with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Toomey?
Yes. A man who says that he wants to discuss with the public, but every time the public votes something, he turns his back on their decision. So that kind of makes me a little upset. Yes, we need, the number one thing is our roads. They're deteriorating. But to keep raising taxes is not the answer. It is to spend what we have more wisely. It is to make a decision when you're selling Merck at $6.5 million and you get test results that it's dioxin, you call them back in the office and you say all bets are off. They couldn't sell that facility for the poison that they found there, okay? You make better decisions. You don't, affordable housing, look, I'm poor. I'm for the poor. And Alan must be for the poor because he's making us poor. You know, the poor have a voice, but they don't have any money. And it's very unfortunate that their voices aren't heard. Every time they ask for a referendum, they don't give the people the choice to go to referendum to see what they need. Our roads, but our treatment plant, thanks to me as mayor, I unprivatized it. When he was on the council, he privatized it to a facility called OMI. And they said, well, we're getting federal money. But the federal money dried up. And so I saved the city about over $400,000 just by unprivatizing it, by giving our workers the job that they really love to do, and they're so very happy. We have talent. And you know, he says he has a great staff, but I had the exact same staff. I had the exact same staff. We do have talented people, but it's the decisions you make in that office that aren't always easy. But you've got to be more sensitive to those people who come in on a daily basis who just can't afford one more thing. So we do have some structural problems, but we can overcome them by making wiser decisions on how we spend our money.
Thank you. Are there any other responses to that?
Yes. The mayor says we're contemplating a grant writer. He says the council decided to do that. You know, more times during this administration when something, you know, when he blamed the council on the tax increase, but he only vetoed $300,000. He blamed the council sending it out by bond. You know, we need leadership. We need direction, and that's the mayor's job. He says he agrees that there's, you know, you heard all of the rattlings off of all the infrastructure problems that the city has. Yet he wants to spend $30 million on a parking garage in downtown Biddeford. He wants to, you know, $6.5 million to close Maine Energy and lose tax revenue and 100 jobs. A parking garage for $30 million, or our roads, the simple things that do need to be fixed. Where is his priorities? It certainly isn't for the taxpayers of the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I have to respond, even though the response has nothing to do with what the question is.
It does.
But, you know, whether it's a parking garage or Maine Energy, that's not what we're talking about. The Maine Energy site, I mean, is going to be environmentally cleaned. Everybody is on board. The numbers are there. That everything. I mean, it's just. I think. Is there another question on that with Maine Energy? No. Okay. Well, I suppose it's important to put it out there because it's been laid on the table. The Maine Energy site is going to be cleaned to environmental standards so that people can live in the area itself. There is dioxin that's going to be cleaned by Casella at the cost of Casella. There are some PCBs at the back site. That's not a result of Maine Energy, but it's going to be cleaned up to park standards, which will be part of the Riverwalk. The parking garage, and again, I don't know if this is a question. Again, it has nothing to do with it does, so I'm going to leave that for that point in time. So, again, the main issue that the citizens of Biddeford have to face is that you've got hundreds of millions of dollars of infrastructure that need to be repaired. How do you do that? How do we get consensus on how to do that? And that's the key issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sam?
The next question is about the parking garage. Mr. Castavant, this one is for you. The argument has been made that a parking garage will enhance the development of the downtown business, and others argue that it's a waste of public funds that will only benefit a few private owners. Do you believe the parking garage is necessary? Do you support or oppose the building of the parking garage downtown?
Okay. There is so much misinformation regarding the parking garage, so I've got to go back to square one. First off, the parking garage is a concept. There were some plans done that identified two sites, one on the Doug Sanford property and one on Washington Street. No site has been chosen at this point in time. It's been deliberated, but we don't have a choice. Secondly, and I have to be absolutely clear on this, if any parking garage should ever fall on the tax rate, I would veto it. I'm not in favor of this going onto the tax rate whatsoever. What it has to be is used by the users. Okay, the payment has to be by the users. So for example, Nathan Zanton, who's a developer that wants to renovate parts of the older mill section, has said that he will guarantee 70 spaces to a parking garage if it is constructed for $50 a month for the next 20 years. That's the type of thing that we need, not just the 70 spaces, but additional spaces. Users, whether tenants or workers in the mills or workers in the downtown, they have to pay for it. But, you know, again, everything is speculative because we don't have a site chosen Financing is iffy. We've talked about a number of things. We've talked to local banks. We've talked to different groups. But again, we don't have that in place. So what's going to happen is this. Should the city council find a possible solution, then we go to the voters to talk to them about it. We have a discussion. We talk about the pros and the cons, and we see what takes place. But there's nothing on my desk, nothing on the table. Do I think that a parking garage is needed? I think that if you think the future of Biddeford, yes, because the mills are rapidly developing and pushing outward. Now, do I think the taxpayer should pay? No. And that's the crux of the issue. And as I said, one last time, if it would ever go on the tax rate, I'd veto it, because I'm totally against that, because taxpayers can't pick up that burden. But the objective is have the users do it. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Tomney?
Are you saying that you'll send it to referendum on the parking garage? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
I didn't say that.
Oh, you didn't say that. Oh,
We're not at that point yet.
oh. But could I have a commitment that you would
No,
do that?
I'm not
Oh.
about to speculate.
No,
we
you
gotta wait
don't
to
want to
see.
ask the public. That's the problem, Alan. Look, there are things that go on in executive session that never stay in executive session. And it was brought to my attention that the deal that was going on, that Doug would pay so much money for the parking garage, but then he wanted to have it. He wanted the city to give it to him. That's the problem, okay? Right now, I'm fighting to keep Meme and Pepe not selling their home. That's how desperate it is. And if you think I'm kidding about gentrification, look at the homes that are for sale in Biddeford, and a lot of people don't even have for sale signs on them. They just want out. Why are we having an exodus? Why do we have less students in our school? What is going on here? We have got to be realistic. You know, it's nice to paint a pretty picture, oh, this, that, but you've got to be realistic, and this is what's going on. We don't need a $30 million parking garage for tattoo parlors. And I'm not against tattoo parlors, but I don't have any tattoos. And I'm just saying, you know, this isn't the time. The economic atmosphere is still not great. The government is shut down. We've got a governor that needs to go. So these are not good times. And so you don't spend that kind of money. You don't want the people who founded those mills having to sell their homes. You know, those are the downsides. But we have great things in our city we should focus on, and the college is one of them. University of New England is a great asset. Our hospitals are great assets, and we need to focus on that, and we need to bring that into the mix. And I don't see that happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Aberley?
The parking garage, we shouldn't even be discussing that right now. I mean, with everything that is on the table, the parking garage should be the last thing that we do discuss. This parking garage is for the mills. You'll hear it often said. It's for the mills. Doug Sanford needs this parking garage. 500 spots will be used up by the mills, not by the downtown businesses that have been around for 100 years. Riley's Bakery, a great business. We don't talk about these businesses. We talk about the mills. Doug Sanford wants the parking garage. It will be on his property. You know, the mayor can say that they haven't chosen a site, but, you know, Google it. There's a site chosen. They've got a picture of the parking garage right where they want to put it. I attended the meeting. So you can't say a site hasn't been chosen because we have a rendering, a photograph of the site and how great it looks. And yes, it's beautiful. It's $30 million. Taxes went up more in Mayor Casavant's administration than they have in 20 years. You know, we have a parking lot now that will not be redeveloped. Maine Energy will not be redeveloped. It's got a sticker all over it that says pollution. But it's a grand ocean, riverfront, access to the water, business location. No, it's not. I have the test results from the company that Casella hired. You know, Casella, you know, let's use that as a parking lot. Let's use that as a parking lot. We spent $6.5 million for it. You know, Another $30 million to build a parking garage is ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous, especially right now when the mayor admits that we have all these infrastructural problems. The clock tower, $2 million. You know, the roads that weren't put in the budget with that huge tax increase. Again, we cannot afford a parking garage today. We shouldn't be discussing a parking garage today. And finally, the one thing that I think that upsets me the most during this administration is special interest groups. We cater to special interest groups. Mr. Sanford wants a parking garage, but the voters in Biddeford don't want a parking garage. If we send that out to referendum, they're not going to approve it. It's $30 million. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other responses?
A couple of things, because again, we're all over the map instead of answering the questions.
No, we're answering the questions.
But essentially
Not your answers.
this is exactly the right time to consider a parking garage, because my opponents have been clear. They want other ways to generate income. They want new revenues. And one of the ways in which you do that is through development. And the mills are part of that development scheme. 1.2 million square feet of vacant space. And something or somebody has got to go in there. If you want a Renaissance in Biddeford, the mills are it. And it's not just Mr. Sanford. There are other mill owners involved in this whole thing. And I got to be clear. Yeah, there's a picture of a mill site, but unless you're calling me a liar, I'm telling you there's nothing on the table. You know, we've tried to move forward and try to offer some suggestions or possibilities, but we're still negotiating. And nothing is fixed. And of course, as I said, the financing is fixed. It was also mentioned that you need an anchor store. Absolutely. But you've got to have a stable downtown to have an anchor store. The anchor store doesn't come first. It comes after the stability and investment. And that's what we're driving. We want to see the dollars, and you do that by good government out of City Hall. Not special interests, but in terms of public-private partnerships to engage people, to generate money, to invest in the downtown. That's what we're after. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. You know, I had an investment to come. People with lots of money who could have paid for it. And Alan's financial report will show you that he took money from the owners of Oxford. Instead of working for Biddeford, he took money from the people of Oxford. This isn't, you know, this is public information. Anybody can see it. They don't even put the owner of Oxford. He says investor. That's the problem. It depends on whose bailiwick. It is about political payback. And Doug Sanford has done great things in the mill. Don't kid yourself. I had my inauguration there. My parents worked there. My grandmother brought the first union in that mill from Canada. I am so proud of my roots. I know what those people slaved for and sweat for, and women would faint because it was so hot, okay? But Mr. Sanford owns a lot of property on Main Street. And every time we bring a business on Main Street, he tries to bring it over to the mill. How are we ever going to develop our Main Street? So there are private interests, and all you have to do is read his financial report. He took $350 from Maine Energy when you're going to make a deal with them. You know, Mr. Walsh wanted to write a check to me. Joanne, what do you need for your election? I go, Mr. Walsh, if I win, I have to sit down with you. You're going to be looking for your best interest. I have to look out for the best interest of the city of Biddeford, and I didn't take 1 red cent. There is political payback. Just follow the money. Follow the money.
Okay.
I get rebuttal, correct? I was sticking on the subject. We were talking about the parking garage. Yes, I talked about Maine Energy, the parking lot, because we spend money on that parking lot. That's all it is. It's a parking lot, a $6.5 million parking lot. And you hear the mayor constantly saying, the mills, the mills. What about the rest of Biddeford? What about the rest of the city? The mills are not what's going to dig us out of the hole that we're in. He says the parking garage is on hold. But for 8 or 9 months, that's all we've been discussing is the parking garage. The city's outraged over it. I will tell you this. Maybe it is on hold for Mayor Casavan until November 7th. And then he'll bring it back on the table. Keep that as a promise.
Thank you. Let's move to our next question. Mike, we're back with you.
Our next question, we're going to start with you, Ms. Toomey.
Okay.
It's based on low-income housing. It has been indicated that there is a growing need for low-income housing in Biddeford. Do you support the development of low-income housing in Biddeford in general, and specifically in the downtown Biddeford area?
No, I don't. And I am poor. We have had enough of our share. What's happening is we've got all these mills that we have to fill the space up. And so you talk about affordable housing. It sounds great. Who the heck doesn't want to help the poor, okay? That's my background. I grew up Catholic with the nuns. You help the poor. I am the poor. But the point is, why is it all coming to Biddeford? And every time you take grant money, look, I was the mayor, Nathan Zanton came in, I researched him, and he made nice apartments. But to continue with affordable housing, you're competing with the people who've lived here all their lives, who have apartment buildings, who can't fill their apartment buildings because now you're competing with this affordable housing. When you take grant money, there's strings attached. And it means a certain minority, a certain this, a certain that. I'm all for that, but why keep bringing it to Biddeford? Why doesn't Kennebunkport take some? You know, so I think we have to look at the reality. And I told my counselors that we had to have this debate. That affordable housing, we all want to help the elderly. You know, it's sexy to say we're going to help the elderly and, you know, the poor. But who pays for those special needs when we have to educate them? And I'm not saying they don't deserve it. We absolutely, you know, I work with special needs at Bedford High School. But if we continue to grow this economy, who ends up having to pay for the education? There's a correlation there, but nobody wants to articulate it because it doesn't sound sexy if you're saying, no, you don't want any more affordable housing. Enough is enough. We are a service center, but that doesn't mean we have to take, you know, and solve all the problems for everyone. So that's how I feel. Thank you.
We're going to move to Mr. Aberley.
Sure, why not? Let's throw it in the mills. That's where we want to put everything, is in the mills. I mean, seriously. No, I don't support it. You know, right now, it's sad. You know, I've lived in this city my whole life, and when I walk through my neighborhood, I see all these buildings boarded up. More and more buildings boarded up because they're condemned. We have the largest problem with bed bugs in the nation. I'm not saying that this has anything to do with low-income housing, but we have real issues here, you know, and before we think about any more housing developments, we need to fix up what we have with problems now. The bed bug problem, that affects everybody. You know, these people people are going to school and bringing them to school, and they're going into book bags, and it's all over the city, but we haven't addressed it. And it's a huge issue. You did try. But it is a huge issue, and it needs to be addressed because it's going to affect the entire city. Before we bring any housing in, we need to look at what's going on in the city now. I mean, in downtown Biddeford currently, I can just, right off 3 streets, I can tell you that there's about 7 or 8 homes that are boarded up, that are unoccupied. Instead of bringing in more housing, let's fix up the housing that we already have that's sitting there. Beautiful houses that are old, that are over 100 years old, just sitting there boarded up. We definitely don't need low-income housing. We have housing that needs to be repaired now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cassavant?
It's interesting that we talked about the fear of gentrification, but now we have limitations of what type of housing we want in Biddeford. The housing that's being proposed in the Mill District is called workforce housing, and essentially it's this, that you have to earn approximately $30,000. It's not a giveaway. You actually have to earn money to live there. When I asked Nathan Zanton about his project that currently exists, he told me that most of the people who came here are not from Biddeford. They came from Portland. They came from everywhere else, but they came here because they wanted to move to Biddeford. In doing so, we're talking artists, we're talking the elderly, we're talking musicians, we're talking people who are just making, like I said, $30,000. And the reality is today, that means an awful lot of people. If you go to Portland, for example, what you see happening is a lot of people your age, maybe a little bit older, obviously, that can't afford an apartment, so they live together, 3, 4, 5 individuals to make enough to pay for an apartment. A $30,000 income when you're paying $600 for a unit, that makes it much more affordable. I should also note that the apartments that we're considering are single bedroom. So we're not talking about large extended families, we're talking about very small things. And it's also part of a master plan. As both candidates know, there's a master plan for mill development, and a certain percentage is reserved for this workforce. And the idea being is that if you create set up tenants within the mill district in the downtown, those people will spend money in the downtown. So there is actually a method behind the madness of it all. It's the idea to get a workforce that's making money so that they can spend the money that in that immediate area. I think that our housing situation, clearly we get an older housing structure, citywide, and that's a problem. There are a lot of vacant buildings. The building inspector yesterday told me about one situation yesterday where a roof was caving in, boarded up house. And we have to be more aggressive with that too in terms of codes and enforcement. But to deny workforce housing is the wrong thing because it clearly applies to certain individuals. And the last point is that if you look at mill development, there are units in there that are based on the economy. They're based on the market. And so there is a mix. And what I found really interesting, again, looking at Nathan Zanton's project, is that you have the the labor force apartments and the market base side by side. No one knows who's who. It's a mixture of those units. So it works out really well.
Thank you. Ms. Toomey?
Yes. Instead of just giving it to Nathan Zanton, who wouldn't use his money, why not give it to some of the people who lived here and have houses that own property and help them to renovate their houses? You know, if you want to talk about economics and you want to help, then don't focus just on one person. I sat with Nathan Zanton and I can't remember his partner's name, but he's very wealthy also. They never use their money. That's smart, right? They use our money. And he got subsidies from the state, and that's all well and good. But why not spread it to the people who have apartment buildings who need to step up? I live on Elm Street. Yesterday, my neighbors were walking by, and I was on corner of Mason and Elm, and they said, we're moving. I said, why? They said, because the rain's coming in from the third floor to the second floor to the first floor in our apartment. I said, well, God, that could be a problem with electricity and stuff. That house has had more complaints than Carter's got liver pills. That house had bed bugs. And I had to intervene to get that family that was being eaten alive by bed bugs because my city staff would not address an ordinance for bed bugs because they didn't want to open up a can of worms. So, spread the money and let's renovate and clean up what we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aberle.
The mayor says, yes, we do have a lot of houses that are in disrepair. That the building inspector reported to him that there's lots of houses that are falling down, a roof caving in. But again, what does he say right after? The mills. Let's do this with the mills. All I hear him talk about is the mills. What about the rest of the city? I find it very sad in the neighborhoods that I played in when I was a little kid. These houses that I was in visiting friends, they're falling to the ground. If you want to create this workforce housing, let's not just put it in the mill. Let's create this workforce housing throughout the city and use and help renovate some of these buildings that people are either can't afford to bring up to code, or they can't afford their taxes, or they're under foreclosure. Let's keep in mind of all of Biddeford, not just special interest groups. And that's why I decided to run, was because I was tired of watching special interest groups being dictating what goes on in this city. It's not about the mills. Yes, they're great. The stores are great. The housing in the mills are great. But what about the rest of the city? This is a great city, but we're focusing in on the mills.
Thank you. Mr. Cassavant?
Yeah, the problem is this. Whether it's Nathan Zanton or Doug Sanford or Chris Benjamin or any of the mill owners, they play by state rules in terms of application for funding. Workforce housing comes from the state and federal government. Individual homeowners are not eligible for any of that. So the city of Biddeford can't say, well, we'd like to develop this house or this house or this house, because there are rules in place, and developers are the ones that apply. So, and it's competitive. In other words, we have developers in Biddeford that apply for this X amount of dollars that's offered by the state. You also have Portland, Westbrook, whatever it happens to be. And there are different types of tax credits, too, that are part of it. So when I'm talking about the mills, it's because individual property owners are not eligible for it. And so you get the biggest bang for your buck. And we're not even sure that all these projects that are being considered by local developers are actually going to be approved by the state. So the mills are probably the centerpiece over there. Again, if you're looking to, let me backtrack. The idea of communities today is to reduce expansion outward and develop inward. Now, I say that because that's going to be the focus in terms of transportation and so forth. It doesn't mean that the city's ignoring that. Like I mentioned at the very beginning, the city nurtured Market Basket. The city of Biddeford is the only city in southern Maine that has new businesses going to the industrial parks. So we're being attentive to those details. But I also recognize that the mills are part of the Biddeford Renaissance. Thank you.
Thank you.
This next question will start with Mr. Aberle, and it's about the casino. Recently, a state panel on a vote of 10 to 8 recommended the expansion of gambling in Maine. And those in support of it believe it will expand jobs and increase funding for the city. Those opposed say it will take advantage of low income, and the only people making a profit off of it will be the casino owners. And do you support the revisiting the idea of having a casino in Biddeford?
Absolutely. It's $2 million tax revenue for the city. It's 1,800 jobs. Former Mayor Toomey should be congratulated for her work trying to bring that into the city. The Mayor Casavant said it was the wrong time. Said that he opposed gambling. You know, he opposed locating a casino in Biddeford. But now that Oxford Casino's sold, it's the right time. You know. All of a sudden, it's okay. He wants, I don't know what his change of heart is. Maybe it's because he saw in 2 years that $2 million would be really nice for tax relief. 1,800 jobs would be really nice. It's Ocean Properties is a fantastic company. The project was a beautiful location. I temporarily worked in the hotel business. It was going to be a 5-star hotel, access from the turnpike so that you weren't getting out-of-towners driving through the city. The project was planned perfectly. Of course, the mayor said it wasn't. The current mayor said that it was a bad deal for Biddeford. It was a great deal for Biddeford. The company that was bringing this to Biddeford would have worked with us on anything that we asked them to. They weren't just going to open up a casino and a 5-star hotel. They were going to be partners here in Biddeford. And secondly, they weren't going to come into business. They weren't going to open up a casino just to sell it. This was a company that was investing in our city. I think my mic fell. That was going to invest in the city. And they were going to be partners for a lifetime. It's sad. It's sad because probably if that development had passed, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in today. I probably wouldn't be sitting here running for mayor. I think that, it would have solved a lot of our problems. I think that if we had called the Welch family or Ocean Properties and said, our clock tower is falling off the city hall, can you help us? And I think they would have said yes, absolutely. I know they would have said yes, absolutely. So this was a good deal for Biddeford. And it's too bad because Mayor Casavant is probably the biggest reason why that never opened up here in the city. And it's very sad. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Casavant?
I never realized how much power I had, that I was the obstacle here. I think people forget it's the people of the state of Maine that rejected the casino bills, not Alan Casavant by himself. I did oppose it in the Maine legislature, and because I think, well, I was skeptical, to be honest with you. for a number of reasons. First off, there were multiple casinos that were being offered through the state of Maine, and I realized that they were carnivorous, that they would feed off the same dollar. The whole process was rushed in the city of Biddeford. There was limited transparency. So I remained skeptical, and I said, even during my campaign, I'm fully willing, if the people of Biddeford want a casino, I'm willing to get the best deal. And I'm still there. In fact, recently I co-signed on the bill for a new casino, mainly because it's so much better than the old bill. But I'm still skeptical, because I want to see the details. And I think that's critical. You can't rush in and be a cheerleader for a casino or racino. You have to start thinking about the ramifications, the possible ramifications. And you've got to have good community dialogue. So right now in the Maine legislature, there is a bill that's going to be circulating. And if I'm elected mayor, what we're going to have is a series of public discussions where Ocean Properties will come and they'll talk about their proposal, their new proposal based on the new scenario. That the people of Biddeford will have ample opportunity to talk about it, to discuss it, to vet it out. We will hear expert testimony from other people from various cities, Oxford and Bangor, about the impact there. And I have to say that based on my conversations, it suggests that it hasn't been as bad as some people have indicated. But we'll process that and get a sense of how people feel. One of the things that's really bothersome then and now is the state law. In other words, casinos or racinos make an awful lot of money. And the way the law is written, state of Maine or the local municipalities don't get as much as they probably should. If you look to Massachusetts, for example, they get far more. So that has to be considered. We have to have a clear bill. And also, again, in terms of what Biddeford gets, yes, we'll get some property taxes, but also we'll get like 2% on gaming tables, 2% on the slots, which is more than it was last time. So that's a benefit too. I would also probably say that if the casino or racino had been passed by the state of Maine 2 years ago, I don't know if Biddeford would immediately have felt the benefits that would have got us out of this jam, because obviously through licensing and everything else, it would have taken some time. You know, it's all hearsay. But again, the people of Maine are the ones who actually vetoed the whole idea of the gaming in Biddeford, not me or the Maine legislature. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Toomey?
This is really hard for me to sit here when I gave so much of my time and did so much homework. We went to the other casinos. I backtracked and talked to the people, what they thought about their jobs and what they thought about their health care. This wasn't rushed. And I sat in that office, and there isn't a developer I like. I'm going to be upfront about that. I'm an environmentalist. Once you lose that space, you never get it back. The people who helped this man win that last election are PR people who are fighting Northern Maine for, I can't remember the name of the land anyway. The people who helped him were partners with people who had investments in Oxford. And when the developers came to my office, I told my city manager, I said, a developer, right? Because he knows I'm an environmentalist. But I sat with them. I saw the family connection. I saw the commitment they made to the Samoset, to Wentworth by the Sea. I can tell good people. That's the gift I have in life, okay? I can tell if you're a phony or I can tell if you're real. And these people are real. And I knew that if they came to Biddeford, they would help my soup kitchens. But most of all, they would pay for the education. When you wear a hat, I bought into everything that says when I was in the legislature, that the seniors get their Social Security check and they go run and spend it all. It is not true. Go to the buses and see who's going to Foxwood, who's going to Oxford. If they're going to spend that money, they should spend it right here in Biddeford. I wouldn't have had to raise taxes. I could have paid education. Education is where it's at, and I needed that money for education. But these people were top-notch. They weren't going to sell it like Oxford. Oxford had planned to sell it all along. And he took money from those people. He helped Oxford. The whole delegation, they never came in to help us with the bill because they already said we could have one in York County. So, you know what? They're good people. I met the farmers who grow the hay, who feed the horses. I met the horse people who love their animals. You know, this whole talk about, you know, crazy. We wouldn't have had to raise taxes. People are going now. It's not going to bring hookers. And all this garbage that you hear is simply not true. It is revenue, and it would have helped this city of Biddeford. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other responses to that?
Former Mayor Toomey is correct. I mean, it was a perfect deal. You know, I guess I find it disturbing. You know, during last year's legislative race, I did run for the legislature, and I accepted a campaign donation from Motion Properties, the developers that were going to bring the Racino to town. Mayor Casavant said, "How can anyone take gaming money? I wouldn't take gaming money. I would never take gaming money." But if you do, if you look at his report, and he won't sit there and say, you know, he didn't. He won't say it's inaccurate, you know. But he did take gaming money. And if you look at the report, it just says investor. But if you research the investor, I think we did it together. Mm-hmm. They're part of the gaming industry. He sold Biddeford out. Taxes increased because he sold Biddeford out. And I hate to say that, but it's one of the, this is one of the #1 issues why I decided to run. Did you take gaming money from the Oxford investors, Mayor Casavant? Can you answer that question right now in front of everybody?
I will when I get my chance.
Okay. In ending, I just want to say that this was a perfect deal. It was a great company. You know, they say the memes and the pepes and the gamblers, the people that like to gamble. We can't have gambling. We got to stop it. But they're going to Oxford anyway. We needed to keep that here in Biddeford. And one last thing, Oxford's taxes went down between 5 and 9% in the first year that Oxford opened. It's too bad we didn't have that for Biddeford.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. First of all, I really resent the implications that are being made by my two opponents. I clearly took money from certain entities. I took money from a lot of people because there were so many people that really wanted to donate because they weren't satisfied with the previous administration. I got to also say that. I got to also say that in terms of the money, I really didn't know who I was getting it. That was not part of my job, but basic thing is I accepted it, and that's fine. But I never, ever was influenced by that particular money. Never. I received a lot of money in the last campaign, absolutely. But it just showed the depth of the dissatisfaction with the previous administration. So I resent that. I've never, ever been influenced by money. In fact, sometimes I've lost votes by people who came to me saying, I gave you money, don't you think that you owe me something? And I've said, no, that's not me. People who know me realize that's not me. I think it's really important that we remain skeptical of every deal. But remember what I said, and I'll say it again. My campaign stance in the last election was simply this: prove it to me. Because if I'm elected mayor, I will guarantee you, if the people of Biddeford want it, I will get the best deal for the best Racino or casino in Biddeford. That was rejected by the people of Maine, by the voters. But had that been passed, that would have been my obligation, and that's what I would have done. And that's what I would do today, if, again, it works its way through the legislature and becomes a bill. I'm not opposed to gambling per se. I don't gamble. It's not important to me. What's important to me is what's good for the people of Biddeford and to make sure we get a fair deal and that we know all the details. And that's what was lacking in the last bill. Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead.
The Walsh family came to City Theater, and we opened it up for everyone to ask questions. And they laid out, they showed the picture of it. There was no hidden deals, and I never took one penny from them. He insults me because he's the only one that can make a good deal. When he gave away Maine Energy for $6.5 million, and he doesn't care about the dioxin for 30 years that we are breathing. Your college, congratulations, is now going to be checking other things than the injured seal. They're going to be looking at water quality. That dioxin is running in that water. And when they first made the great deal, please, it makes me sick. I went and talked to our environmental officer, Brian Finney. He said, Joanne, they should at least have a fence around it. It was running in the Saco River, our fishermen, our fish. What about the 30 years of us breathing? We were the toxic landfill. He never went anywhere. Now he's getting credit for getting rid of Maine Energy. People laugh. They know for 30 years I was at every meeting, every state. I was never home because that was my issue, to get rid of that facility, but not pay 6.5 for them poisoning us. He is not a good deal maker. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next question will be on the topic of the airport. This one is for you, Mr. Castavant. Do you believe the airport should be closed, remain as it is, or expanded? If you choose to close it, then what should be done with the space? If you choose to expand, how should it be expanded?
I think that the airport should remain open, and I think that it should be stabilized. The airport's an asset. If you look at the state of Maine or New England, every other community that accepts airport funds loves getting that. In the past year, we lost $450,000 to Dexter, of all places. We lose $150,000 every single year. We give it away. We've been doing that for a number of years, even though a number of years ago, 83% of the population of Biddeford said they wanted to keep the airport open and they wanted to keep it stable. The city council and the city governments have rejected that vote for the last, I don't know, five, 6 years, whatever it happens to be. I really believe that the airport could be used for economic development. I know for a fact that pilots come in on a regular basis and go to the University of New England. They use Rummery's Boatyard, Arundel Machine Shop, employs 20-something people, regularly use the airport. I think you have to look at the airport in a regional context, because Kennebunk, Saco, Old Orchard, Kennebunkport, and Arundel are all part. They all have pilots that go there. There's a lot of misinformation. They talk about how very limited it is in terms of usage. Well, we know because we got to do computer software that from beginning of July to end of August, there were over 600 takeoffs and landings of that particular airport. So it's being utilized. The question is, how well is it being utilized? I talked to a gentleman the other night who owns a hangar there. He doesn't live in Biddeford, but he owns a hangar, so he pays excise taxes, hangar fees, and property taxes. $15,000 that he pays, no kids in school, nothing. He gives the money to the city of Biddeford. We could do better than that. We have that hangar space. To close it, well, a recent report suggested that it's probably not feasible because it's going to cost too much money. And I would argue that airports bring jobs, whether it's through the maintenance and operational character of the facility, or because of neighboring businesses that utilize it. The problem has been so much negative talk and so much misinformation that people just, who might have an airplane, don't park it there and don't give us our excise tax. But again, we're all talking about generating new fees, but in this case, we reject it. We should be taking advantage of that. I'm not talking about expansion, even though expansion seems to mean a lot of different things to different people. I'm talking about keeping the existing runway, doing what's necessary to make it safe and practical, enticing new businesses to use it, advertising it, putting it on our webpage, making it accessible. Because again, if people want jobs, you just can't sit here and say, please, jobs come. You got to do something about it. You got to be aggressive. Whether it's looking at redevelopment in the industrial parts or in the downtown, whether it's using the airport, there are mechanisms in place to generate those jobs. But the city has to be active and not casually reject hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on a yearly basis for no reason except going against the will of the people 4 or 5 years ago. Again, 83% said keep it open and fix it. Thank you.
Ms. Towney, your thought?
That's okay. You know, when my opponent ran against me last time, I was walking to the supermarket, looked up in the air, and saw a big banner, "Vote Castavant for mayor." And so, of course, he is always, that's an interest group also, the airport. But when I go knocking on my doors, there isn't an airport in somebody's garage. They can barely keep what they have. So every time you take federal money, you've got to match it. So over the years, they kept taking it. They went out to vote, and the referendum said, they didn't want to, they wanted to close it. Then there was another referendum that was interpreted, they didn't want to close it. So that's been an ongoing discussion for years and years and years. Let me tell you one thing. My husband died of cancer 12 years ago. The only thing in my life are my grandchildren, and they go to those schools. But because the city fails to have plans, they built the new schools right near the airport. One plane crashes in that school, you take out my grandchild, and I will never, ever be able to breathe again. That's how much I love my grandchildren. That's how much I love all the children in this area. When you go out off of West Street and you hear a small plane even, my son moved to the other side, right across from St. Joseph's Church Cemetery, and I'm in his yard, and I can hear those planes. They sound like they're going to land right on your house. Is that nice when you're having a cookout, plane after plane after plane? But I don't care about the planes. I don't care about all that economic talk. I care about those children, and they built those brand new schools near that airport. Did not make sense. If they wanted to expand the airport, if they thought that was an economic engine, they never should have placed those schools near that airport. Plain and simple. The people out there don't like it. They don't want to expand it. And let me tell you, when I was mayor, my city manager wanted me to buy the land from the Trolley Museum, and I'm sure they're still trying to do that. They say, oh, it's going to make it safer. That's expansion. And I said no. I intervened. And I went to the DEP in Augusta and helped them to have a plan so that we could do something to keep it open, but not have to keep taking money from the federal government, because then we have to give it back. Thank you.
Mr. Aberley?
I guess that's the most important thing that we need to keep in consideration, is that, yes, our schools were built right next to the airport. Let's not forget, last year, a plane crashed into a residential house that was going to land in that airport. Bad planning. The property generates no revenue for the city. The property was valued at, I think it's assessed at $2 million currently. In 2010, it was assessed at $800,000. I mean, $8 million. I know. I spoke to the city manager, and if we redevelop the airport, it would be the property would be assessed at around $5 million. That was a rough ballpark, but that's tax revenue that we could bring into the city. It's certainly, it sounds great to have an airport right here in the city. But I'm not willing to risk the lives of our children in the schools. I'm not willing to risk another house having a plane drive through another house. I mean, luckily these people weren't home, but you're sitting home watching TV, and unfortunately at any given time a plane could malfunction and land on your house. I mean, it's reality. It's happened. We need to sell the airport once and for all. We've beat this issue up for 20 years, and it's time to move on. That's one of the issues I think that with the city, is that we beat issues up to death. We don't move forward because we don't fix some of these issues. We need to sell the airport. We need jobs. We need, and you can't tell me that airport, that little strip of runway, is going to create jobs in the city. We can't land. Air Force One can't land there. They can land in Sanford. We have an airport in South Portland. We don't need the airport in Biddeford to generate jobs. Businesses are not going to come to Biddeford because we have that little strip of runway. Thank you very much.
Is there any comments on this question?
Yeah, a couple of things. It's always interesting to me that when people are opposed to something, they always go worst case scenario. In this case, a plane crashing into a school or a house. Yeah, I suppose it's reality, but of course, we've recently had accidents in Biddeford by cars where cars hit houses and pedestrians, and we don't even think about banning cars on roadways. I think we have to look at it in a real term and not in a hypothetical term. Does the airport generate revenue? Absolutely. Every time a plane is tied down, you get revenue. The hangars rent space. In fact, the recent report that we had about the possible closure said that if we close it, we would have to probably pay in damages and loss of property about $2 million. There is revenue being generated. Can we generate more? Most definitely, especially if you start advertising correctly. Because again, I kind of compare this scenario to something like a restaurant that's having a rough time. And what do? They cut back on portions. And when they cut back on portions, people don't buy gift cards. They stop going there, and that's the deathward spiral. Biddeford by itself cannot maintain the airport. It needs federal funds. And this idea about, oh my God, we're linking ourselves to the future by doing that, it's just like a mortgage. When you get a mortgage, they expect you to do something with the house too. It's linked. So I think it's an asset. I look at Arundel Tools, manufacturing, the 20-something jobs, and I know that can be duplicated. It's something that can improve the quality of life and give jobs to Biddeford. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak on this subject?
I just would like to say, hypothetically, he says hypothetically, but we experienced a plane did crash into someone's home. Sorry, but it happened once. I'm not saying that it's going to happen again, but it's too close to home. And no, the airport does not generate revenue for the city. Unless the city manager was giving me inaccurate information, the airport breaks even. The airport breaks even. We don't generate revenue. We can generate revenue, $2 million to close it. But we can bring in some jobs and redevelop the property. I'm here to tell you, in that industrial area, we'll have a better time redeveloping the airport than we will Maine Energy site that we spent $6.5 million to close. So, I mean, hey, we can spend $6.5 million to close an incinerator in downtown Biddeford, but we can't spend $2 million to close an airport. I mean, it doesn't make sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, we have time for one more question, and we're going to shorten this from 3 minutes to 2 minutes. So keep that in mind, and then we'll have an opportunity for 2 minutes of closing remarks for each of you. And Mike, would you ask our next one? I think we're with Ms. Toomey.
Yes, it's in regards to the University of New England. We were curious to see, well, UNE is increasingly important, I think, in an economic and social contributor to Biddeford. I was wondering if you could give us your point of view on how UNE students could be more engaging in the community, or how some businesses or the students may interact with the city.
I love UNE. I think it's a jewel in our community. The Ross Community Center was named after my uncle, who donated a great deal of money to UNE. I've sat down with Danielle and had tea with her because we have a mutual friend, that Dr. Bernard Henry, that she went to school with. I think what that school contributes to the city is lots and lots of jobs. And I think I've enjoyed having you at my meetings, and I think the students are key to this city. I tried to come as many times as they've asked me to come and speak on environmental issues, because in the state legislature I was on the Natural Resource Committee, and I always come. They seem to enjoy it. I was asked last week, but I couldn't. I had another commitment. I think you can come. You already told me, we discussed this before the debate, that you come downtown and you love the mills, and you were telling me all the things you like. I think that communication is key. But I also think that I would like to see some kind of free schooling for some of our students. Maybe that's asking too much, but I think where we contribute a lot to the school also, and they contribute to us, make no bones about that. I would like to see an exchange or a potential for someone who can't afford to come to this school, because I think it's a great school, and I promote it as much as I can. So I think the students, just the fact that you're going into a different direction with the seals. I'm just pointing that out, because now you're looking for, why the seals get sick. Cause and effect is very important. I think the more the school does those kinds of things, you're helping our community because you're talking about the water resource. I tried to involve you in the air resource when the incinerator was spewing dioxin all over us. So I think it's a great place, a great avenue for discussion, and I'm very pleased to have you in the city of Biddeford.
Thank you. Mr. Aberley?
I think it's great having University of New England located here in the city of Biddeford. I think that I'm proud. I'm proud to, you know, I don't care where you go. If you bring up University of New England, people know the university. They know the college. As a child, my doctor was at University Healthcare. I went there for many years. The help that you guys do volunteering at the free clinic is excellent. I do concur with Ms. Toomey in regards to, we have some really smart high school students that can't afford to go to school, and I think that some type of program could be beneficial for both UNE and for the city. I think that other than that, I'm proud that we have the college in our community. I think it's important. I think it sets us apart from many communities in the state and in the country.
Thank you. Mr. Cassavant?
I've been working with UNE for a number of years. Before I became mayor, when I was a teacher at Biddeford High School, I used to have Ed Bilski and some other professors come into my class. I majored in psychology and taught psychology. But they would come into my class and work with my students, and other professors did the same thing at Biddeford High School in science labs and so on and so forth. So we always had a great relationship, and I really valued that because my kids always thought it was cool to be able to listen to a professor come in to talk to them and probably avoid listening to me. But anyway, that was a different story. Last year, I actually had some college students come to my office to talk about Biddeford and what they perceived Biddeford to be and what they wanted of Biddeford. I've talked to several officials of UNE to continue that particular policy. In fact, I've even reached out thinking that maybe it might be wise to have a member of the college as a permanent representative at a council meeting to talk about their perceptions of some of the things that we do and done. And I say that because it's my belief that in terms of Biddeford, we need to expand the way we look at it. I formed a committee called the Vision 2020 Committee to look at how Biddeford should be by the year 2020 in terms of fiber optics, in terms of industry, in terms of technology, you name it. And we had many voices, but I was missing certain voices. So like last week, I went to Biddeford High School and talked to 12 kids that we're going to be meeting on a monthly basis, talking about what their vision of Biddeford is. Yesterday, I was at the 50 Plus Club talking about their vision, knowing full well that the vision of that age bracket and the younger age bracket is totally different. I want to do the same with UNE because I think you would bring a valuable perspective to city politics. Being from the outside looking in, you look at it differently. And I want to be able to engage you in terms of, and I'm doing this selfishly because I recognize that you bring with you a lot of dollars and it'll be an economic improvement in terms of spending. But what types of stores do you want? What types of restaurants do you want? What can we do better? How do we engage you to be able to feel comfortable walking in the streets of Biddeford? I've been working in other areas too, whether it's algae bloom or river issues, found UNE to be an excellent partner, and I want to be able to continue that.
Thank you. Any other responses? Okay, thank you for your time.
All right. We thank you for your questions. We'll move to closing remarks. Each of you have 2 minutes, and I believe, Mr. Aberley, we will begin with you.
I want to start off by thanking my opponents for their service to the community. 20 plus years of dedicated service to the community. Today I bring new leadership, a new voice, and I think that that's important. I think that taxes and jobs are our main issues that we face in this city, and I think that in the next 2 years, if I'm elected, I know and can guarantee that we won't have any tax increases. We will have new tax revenue. The casino will be revisited during my administration if elected. I want to thank all of you for having this opportunity today. You as well. I appreciate it. It's been a great forum, and I've had a good time, and I really appreciate all you've got hard work for today's debate. Thank you.
Mr. Cassavant?
First, thank you for allowing us to be here today and to speak. You know, being mayor is probably one of the greatest jobs in the world. It has so many challenges. You begin to meet so many dynamic people, creative people, and it's been a great job for me to have. I could be more lucky for having the job, for having the wonderful staff, and be able to drive the city forward. Yeah, there's controversies at times and disagreements, but my point of view is always trying to do what's best for the majority of the people based on the facts at hand. I try to be objective, and I try to be open-minded, and I never have ever said that I have a closed mind. I sometimes make my mind up right when I'm making my vote or making a policy decision. Not perfect, don't intend to be. I make mistakes, but I can guarantee you that I usually learn from them. I do believe that Biddeford's a better place today than it was 2 years ago. I think that we put it on the right track in terms of focus, in terms of tone, in terms of civility, in terms of attracting jobs. My office is always buzzing with entrepreneurs that are curious about Biddeford. As I said earlier, Forbes magazine listed as a hot spot. One individual told me, Alan, you'll never believe this, but in terms of technology and fiber optics, Biddeford is a buzzword. We're doing a lot of things right. I think in the next 2 years, we're on a cusp of greatness. I really believe, and I'm an optimist by nature. My glass is always half full. I don't have much time for people that are negative and complaining. I think that we can change the dynamic and move Biddeford forward in the 20th century, and 21st century. And I really hope that the people of Biddeford will give me that opportunity, because I want to make a livable community that's safe, friendly, and optimistic for everybody. Thank you.
Ms. Toomey?
Thank you. I'd like to thank the students as well, and you also, Mr. McReynolds. I remember you when you came out against the Racino, but I won't hold it against you. I'd like to leave with a little quote. It says, no person was ever honored for what she received. Honor has been the reward for what she gave. And I'll tell you, he might have business leaders in his office. I had lots of children, and I had lots of people who had lots of problems, and they told me that when I was mayor, they never saw the likes of the people coming in. So I feel like I was the people's mayor. They weren't afraid to come and talk to me. But honestly, out of 18 years of public service, this is what means the most to me. This is a card from Biddeford High School thanking me for the renovation of their school and not losing accreditation. Every one of these kids signed it, and it means the world to me. That's who I am. I'm no phony baloney. I don't lie. I don't take money from people I'm going to have contracts with, and what you see is what you get. I don't say things to win an election. And although he makes me sound like I was the worst mayor in the world, the reason I decided to run is people were stopping me at the supermarket and saying they were sorry, they made a mistake. So, you know, in the end, we shall see who wins. Whoever wins, it's a great city, and I just think we're spending way too much money. They have spent way too much money, and we just can't afford it. We've got to rethink what we're doing. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. I'd like to thank our candidates for your time, your thoughts. I'd like to thank Steve Poulos for his behind-the-scenes work in putting this on today. And I want to thank our students for starting what we hope is a tradition here in the city of integrating UNE more into the active political life of the city. So thank you very much, and I thank you, the viewers, for watching, and look forward to more fora on the way. Thank you very much.